All right, we're
Well,
live.
hello there, everyone, and welcome to Consciousness Caffeine Radio. I'm Rainbow Warrior Goddess Lisa, and my co-host,
BrettStar, the Debt Master. How are we all?
Hello, love. Today we have a really awesome show. We've had kind of some heavy ones in the past, and I've been really wanting to get more of an inspirational topic matter. And today we definitely have it with our special guest, Brett Jones. Brett is a spiritual teacher, adventurer, and lover of people, as well as the author of his new book, which is a bestseller called Awaken, a guide to enlightenment and excuse me, I gave the title wrong, but the title, okay, Modeling Being Human. His book is titled Awaken, and it's a guide to enlightenment and awakening. He has assisted many followers master inner peace by knowing their true nature and to live life passionately. He has also assisted many to overcome depression, anxiety, loneliness, and sadness. He is renowned for his insight into human nature and the mysteries of life. I call that a modern-day mystic. He has been featured in the media, such as Channel 9 in Australia, Western Australian newspaper, CNBC Canada, First Point India, and I hear he just got back from a big successful showing in Las Vegas. So with that, he's a lot more than this. He's studied many different ancient mystic texts like the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, Course in Miracles, the Quran, the Book of Tao, the Vedic texts, etc. And he's a wealth of wisdom and teachings to help us all awaken on this planet, which is so desperately needed. And welcome to the show, Brett Jones. How are you today, my dear? Thank you for joining us.
Lisa.
Welcome, Brett.
And Brett. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really nice to be here.
We're very excited to have you. And as we were just talking quickly beforehand, you and I are in similar fields, and we're both inspired to help humanity awaken to our true divine nature. And I'm so excited to have a gentleman. Brett and I co-host, so we have the divine masculine and feminine balanced in the seat here. And now we have a lovely gentleman here to show and model and help share your wisdom with everyone as to how a man becomes completely empowered, enlightened, and spiritual, and still is a Rocksome man. Actually, that's the best kind of man. So why don't you share your story a little bit and tell the listeners how you get to be here today?
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. So my story started nearly 30 years ago. And like most of us, you know, I started in life as a normal person and went to school, got married, you know, went into business, and I had a very large business in my 20s. Mm-hmm. And I worked on that very hard. Success became very important to me for lots of reasons that, you know, we'll cover a little bit later in the show. And I ended up losing that business, and it became the impetus for other things that occurred in my life at the time. So probably more impactfully for me was that I lost the marriage that I had at the time. And in those days, you know, when you lost the marriage, you also pretty much lost contact with your children as well. You get to see them every second weekend was the normal arrangement. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of pain being poured onto me, you know, at that point in my life. And I guess like most people, when we're in those situations in life, we're experiencing events that we really don't want and really don't like.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I had a choice. You know, I could, I guess, get collapsed by that, get crushed underneath that, or I could ask a really good question. And fortunately, I guess I was blessed in that, you know, I believe I was guided to ask the question. The question I asked is, why did this happen to me? Why did this occur?
Nice question.
And then, you know, as I asked that question, it did two things. One, it took what the ego normally does, which is blame everyone else and project it everywhere else onto everything else and everyone else. And it started by the question to direct it back to myself. And I realized at the time, well, you know, this is all happening to me, so I must have had some part in creating all of this. And, you know, I had a business that was operating in 3 states of Australia. I had assets that at the time were worth about $400 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it had grown very rapidly and then collapsed very rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And losing the family, losing contact with the kids, all of that happening at once was quite intense, obviously.
Yeah.
And fortunately, a friend of mine had done an event, and she suggested that I should attend. In fact, she suggested myself and my ex-wife attend.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at that
Nice.
point, she had already got to the place where the relationship for her was over with. So she didn't want to attend. But I was so desperate not to lose the marriage that I went in the hope that it would keep the marriage together. And during the event, I had what most would call, I guess, a spiritual experience.
Do you mean like a samadhi state? Just to clarify, do you mean like a samadhi state or a visionary experience or actually a full complete
all of that together in one? And it really changed completely the way that I viewed life, I viewed people. My priorities completely altered, and I began to awaken. I began to wake up to the realities of life. And my marriage didn't impact on my marriage at all. And, you know, she was firmly of the view the marriage was finished. So it was. And I moved on from that event and became quite, I guess, fascinated by human nature and the realities as I saw them then. And I went to a second part of the event and I met my wife, Marie. Who's a gorgeous soul, and I was definitely meant to have met her. And we were friends for about 2 years, and then that friendship developed into you know, a long-term relationship, an intimate relationship. And we've both been on this path now for nearly 30 years. You know, we've been married now for 23. And over that period of time, you know, I think there are different stages to awareness and awakening. And it has been, I guess, a passion, certainly a calling to want to go through those stages myself. And at times, you know, I've moved forward and I've fallen back. But I believe now that the stage to which I'm at is one of completion, of knowing what it is to be fully awake and fully aware of what it takes in life to be awakened. And I think now, if I can offer it and share it, is that my favorite saying around this would be from the Tao, from Lao Tzu, which is, you know, before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water, and after enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water. So I think you get to a certain point where you just, you know what it's about, you see the bigger picture, you understand, you've had direct experience of that bigger picture, and it's not so much an understanding of what enlightenment is, but more that you've realized it, but you also realize you have to live here in this duality. So Lisa,
yes,
you know, it's not about, I've met many on the path, and you know, we all want to talk about the mystic experiences and the things that we have, and that is certainly part of that path that we go through. But it's it's not the essential part of the path. It's things that will occur, you know, as we become more awakened, more aware, more enlightened. But I guess the plainness of life becomes about acceptance of that, acceptance of the day to day, and most importantly, being able to accept the events that occur in our life. So Marie and I, once we'd met, because we met in that environment, we were sort of committed to each other that we were always going to grow, we were always going to challenge ourselves to be more and to become more aware. And
to be soul mirrors for each other.
Yes, absolutely, exactly. And we were certainly destined, you know, to do that at some point, and I'm glad we chose this lifetime to do it in. We decided to take the path of And I guess we probably weren't totally aware of it at the time, but we chose the path of removing ourselves from life and the systems and Mara as much as possible. So we bought a yacht. We sailed.
Get off the grid.
Yes, get off the grid. We bought a yacht, sailed it around Perth and the Fremantle area and out to Rocksome Island and just locally for about a year. And then we left. We went up the coast to an area called Dampier. It took us about 3 months to get up there. And then we sailed. We left Australia. So we took the first trip away from the safety shore and sailed out to the Cocos Islands. It took us 12 days to get there. And then we continued on that journey for another 3.5 years. And we were very much out of the grid, very much, in the silence, very much away from all the systems of having to be hooked in. And it really, we noticed a couple of very profound things, I think. And that was that as we disconnected, the inbuilt level of stress just dropped away dramatically. And it really took us about 6 months to completely decompress from being part of everything that we've created in what we now call life. And even in those times, on the ocean where we were 3,000, miles, 3,000 kilometers from anything, really by ourselves. And there were moments of, being on night watch, staying up, in periods in the night for 4 hours by oneself. And you would hear the whales come near the yacht and they would breach and you could hear them. It would scare the living daylights out of you when they did it, of course, but it was still a beautiful thing. And you'd have a lot of time for contemplation, a lot of time for thinking about what life is, and a lot of time realizing that in that environment, when we stressed about it, it was a very instant stress. There was a stress, you dealt with the stress, and then the stress was gone. Yeah. Whereas here in the world that we've, quote unquote, the world that we've created, our perceptions of the world, there now is a long-term stress that most of us actually have never had the experience of being away from. Some, of course, have, but most of us have not. And we don't realize how pervasive and all-inclusive that stress is to the way in which we now live. So
a fish doesn't know it's immersed in water.
No, precisely. And we hear that egoic voice, we hear that stress when we're worried about something, and it's persistent and it goes on. Out there in that environment, you would deal with the bad weather, or you would deal with the engine breaking down, or you would deal with whatever was necessary to deal with. And then it would be gone. And that's a very different experience. So it was quite profound in terms of experience, because, Lisa, what I've discovered over the years of now, having had that trip, come back, decided to want to serve humanity and actually begin to teach others. So we then started up what we called then Create. And now we've been doing that work for, nearly 20 years now. And running events and helping others have that direct experience of being free of the ego, getting to a point of beginning to awaken and separating from the systems that we've now created, in this life. And what I've discovered is that most of us don't appreciate that in going on this journey to seek to awaken and to enlighten, if we are at all called to that in this lifetime, and many of us, of course, now are, so many of us are, growing into that and wanting to, one, become that, and then, of course, share that with others. But what I've seen is that what's missing in a lot of teachings is what Buddha's spoken about and has somehow got covered up over the years. And I've found that, in all systems of teachings, whether it was Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tzu, invariably, when people come to it, they're still using their ego to interpret, what's being said. And we're not fully comprehensive of the way in which we've been conditioned by our culture, by the events that have occurred to us in this lifetime, and by the people that we've modeled, either our family or other authority figures in our life.
Yeah, all the belief systems that we've adopted along the way.
Absolutely.
Unknowingly, subconsciously, mostly by the time you're 7. And then
Yes.
just use it as law without ever questioning it. No, the shadow
Absolutely.
work. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And being able to recognize, how do we break free from that conditioning when it's impacting, you know, something happens and we react to that and we think we have no choice. And then out of that, we, you know, if we, as a great example would be, you know, a young girl grows up and for whatever reason, she hasn't really connected with her father. You know, there might have been just a personality difference between the two of them. Maybe he's a very shut down or closed off, you know, type person, and he can't really express his feelings. And of course, as a young girl, she's very much about expressing her feelings and talking and connection and communication and relationship and all those things that are, you know, very much essentially the feminine. And it's so beautiful when you see it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
And she can't.
You're describing me and my dad, by the way.
Yes. A lot of men, of course, in that you know, in that time, were very much shut down from the war and other things that occurred. So, you know, a lot of girls have grown up with that and hence shifted to the masculine. But, you know, staying on point here about it, you know, she can't connect with him. So she starts to form a view. She starts to put it into a context that we could call man. So it's not just him. Now it becomes, when she looks out into reality, now it becomes men. And now her relationship with all men is affected by this relationship she's had here, this conditioning or a series of events that have occurred.
The program.
And now she will continually pick men who cannot open up to her, closed down and shut down. And then, of course, as a feminine woman, she's looking for that connection. She's not getting that connection. And, you know, I was talking to a lovely lady the other day, and, you know, she's in her 30s, and she's gone through a number of relationships and never truly found that intimate connection because she keeps choosing men who are, in fact, shut down.
Vibrationally and woundedly equivalent.
Absolutely, yes. And this conditioning, you know, cuts across not just in relationships, it cuts across in how we deal with people. Do we truly let them in? Do we truly let somebody love us? Or have we been conditioned to hold them back a little bit in a relationship?
Exactly.
And if we hold them back a little bit in a relationship, naturally, of course, if we're in a relationship and someone is doing that to us, we perceive that. So our natural human reaction is to hold a little bit back. And so that gap, you know, grows even more and more and more. And we set it up to choose someone that would, in fact, do that, would hold a little bit back. So when we look in a crowd, you know, if we go to a nightclub as a young lady, and there might be 100 men there and 99 Prince Charmings that would open up to her and talk to her and treat her like the princess that she is and deserves to be. But she would pick the guy in the corner with the tats and the rolled up sleeves and, you know, the bad boy.
Yeah, because that's what she's wired for.
So it becomes so important as a first step in becoming awake and becoming aware and becoming enlightened to able to stand back from that conditioning and see when it's affecting us. How is it affecting me at work? Am I able to say what I need to say, or do I avoid conflict? How does it affect me with wealth and money? You know, do I attract those things to me, or do I push them away? Am I a risk taker, or I'm not a risk taker? How do I deal with risk?
Exactly.
How does it impact?
All the most excellent questions.
Excellent. You know, how does it impact in terms of how do I relate to myself on the inside? Do I overthink things? So a lot of us, by the conditioning, by the modeling that we've done, when we take that modeling, because we are a duality like everything else in this universe, we stick basically that conditioning into the egoic portion of ourselves. So it affects our body. We can clearly see that in any picture that we take of ourselves. When we look at the muscle structure on one side of the face compared to the other, it is different.
Yes.
So we take that conditioning, put it into that side, And if we're then using that to perceive life, if we've modeled someone who is overly critical towards us, or we've modeled someone who themselves has got a very strong internal voice, we will then take that on, and we will find that our expression of the ego, our personal expression of it, is very intense in terms of how it speaks to us. Some of us recognize it because it is very intense. Others have more moderate internal voice. It's still there, but perhaps not recognized as much by the one where it's quieter on the inside. But
yeah.
nevertheless,
No, and that has everything to do with our culture and their parents' beliefs, that whether you were planted in front of a television or raised by babysitters or your actual family. And I call it the dance of the divine masculine and feminine, because our ego lives in our left brain, and all it really wants to do is protect you. But it also is you know, the vast majority of humans, I would say probably 99.9%, when they're after 7 in the world and they're programmed, don't really only view the world through the left brain. And it's been done that way purposely. And that triggers the limbic system and the fear and the constant adrenals, which your body is not meant to deal with. But, and I tried getting rid of my ego completely. Oh my God, that was not a safe thing to do, especially when Kundalini came along. And I decided to, instead of try to kill my ego, that I realized my soul chose it as the perfect avatar to have the experience it wanted to in this lifetime. So I promoted it to my director of integrity for my higher self. And now he's so happy to serve my inner divine feminine, my emotions, my heart, and my higher wisdom. And that's how it worked primarily. But it is this dance of the masculine and the feminine, and it plays out inside and outside so innately.
And those clues, you know, have been left for us. So when you read the Pali Canon, which of course are the documents.
What is that book?
So
I was reading your autobiography.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh my God, a book I didn't know. What is it?
So the Pali Canon is the writings that all the monks wrote down after Buddha passed. And they wrote down everything that they could remember that he spoke of, and every teaching that he gave. And it clearly says in there that even after enlightenment, you know, Buddha still heard the voice of Mara. The difference was that after enlightenment, he truly recognized it for what it was, that it was not him. He separated from it and could make that distinction inside himself, that yes, there is my ego, there is my Mara speaking to me once again, but I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to follow it. I'm not going to go down the path of what it suggests, because the insanity of its thought system, once you recognize it, becomes very clear. It's a bit like Eckhart Tolle speaks about, where the very thing, you know, as you just said, that the ego is trying to protect us against. So it might say, as an example, you know, I don't want to speak up in relationships because when I was a little girl or a little boy, you know, I got told off in my family. And so hence I became a little bit shy and didn't really want to speak out. So now in relationships, you know, I don't speak out a lot. So what the ego says is that if you don't speak out a lot and you don't upset the relationship, then that will maintain the relationship, that will keep the relationship good. Of course, what it will actually do is destroy the relationship, because you need that masculine feminine dynamic. You will argue in a relationship because that's the nature of the duality that we are. We're of course going to disagree at times. And it's not the disagreements, it's how we overcome those disagreements that determines whether the relationship will be a long-term one or not. So the ego, in fact, says, I'm going to protect your relationship. I'm going to keep it together. And all you need to do is be quiet and really don't speak up and say the things that you feel inside. And that will keep everything good. Let's just hide it under the carpet. But what
or ask to get your met, or set a healthy boundary. Any of that stuff that makes anyone uncomfortable, don't go there.
Yes, precisely. And what of course it does is it actually slowly destroys the relationship. So the way that I like to express it is the divine is always happy to have short-term pain in terms of having that conversation or losing weight or disciplining oneself with money. Any of those examples, it's short-term pain, very short, but long-term gain. The ego wants the exact opposite. short-term pleasure, and it will make us put up with long-term pain. Don't have the conversation, the relationship will fail. Eat all that food, you will get fat. It won't kill you right now. It will just take a long time to kill you.
No, exactly. It just chooses the known, guaranteed pain and suffering that it is familiar with over the tremendous fear of change or doing something different. Exactly. And unfortunately, we're very adaptogenic beings, so we can put up and tolerate a lot of shit.
Yes. This is so true, Lisa. And the ego will definitely make us put up with a lot of pain. And, you know, I'm sure we've both seen lots of people over the years where, you know, they will do the same thing. They'll go through 5, 10 relationships. They will put on a tremendous amount of weight. They will end up broke for years and years. Or they'll go and seek out drugs as a way of escaping from that reality.
Medication, yeah.
Yes.
People self-medicate with anything. They can medicate. They self-medicate food, sex, gambling, liquor, drugs, anything. And there's so many distractions now. Porn, whatever.
Exactly.
You know? I think I agree with that, because we are definitely the addict. It's the addiction. It depends what you connect yourself to.
Yes.
And I know that we've all done it, and we're all guilty. And you're right. It just depends on how far you want to push your change and understand where you're making mistakes, or, you know, do you really want to spend this time loving this other person? It is a beautiful thing, but scary at the same time.
It is.
Right, and can I bet to guess that you would choose the words not about to power over, but it's about how much suffering can you take before you choose to surrender to it?
Yes. And I guess, Lisa, that was my example before, that, you know, fortunately, and it sounds a silly word to use, but fortunately, I had so much pain poured on me in such an intense short period of time that, like I said, you can either choose to be crushed completely underneath that, or you can choose the opposite, which is, okay, I just never want to experience this level of pain again. And that becomes the awakening moment where you don't. And, you know, I was certainly very motivated. You know, I've always been motivated by love. And there's no doubt that I'm a lover. And
I love that.
Thank you.
I love a man saying that.
Yeah, thank you.
And I feel the authenticity of it as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I wanted to learn the skills with an intimate partner. So, you know, I spent a lot of time, energy, effort, money to learn those skills, to learn from the very best people in the world that could offer those skills, and finally understand, you know, what it is to be in a relationship with the divine feminine, what the feminine actually is.
So I take it you took a tantric path, the two of you.
Yes, we did.
Wonderful.
We explored that. And also, you know, a tantric path from, and not just sexually, but, you know, more importantly, the dynamic that is expressed in the actions and the communication, particularly of the divine feminine, and how, you know, she would communicate, how it has to be completely expressed. Whereas the masculine wants to trim that down and minimize that, you know, as much as possible. Yes. Which, of course, you know, doesn't work in a divine relationship. You have to be able to allow her to fully express herself and be present in that expression and be fully there for her when she's expressing the full extent of her perception of reality, which is a completely different experience to one that you have, you know, as a man.
Yeah, most men just try to tolerate it and not pay attention to it, unfortunately. But it's also about not being intimidated by the woman. A real man who knows his power is not intimidated by a strong woman. He's inspired by her. And
Absolutely.
I did want to preface, there's a lot of BS out there in the mainstream about what Tantra is. And there's a lot of people getting together who are just pretty much polyamorous and don't want to have any true deep connection and want to use it as an excuse to get really good at sex and having sex with multiple people. That's not the Tantra I was referring to. I was referring to the true Tantra, which is the art of lovemaking by honoring the divine masculine and feminine within each of us and your lover as the altar. Would that be of expressing it?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely. Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that dynamic becomes very important to, one, understand, because when we as consciousness or awareness, however you wish to express it, look out into this universe and this energy field around us and perceive what is happening, we do it at three levels. We do it perceptually from our mind, and the construct that we make around that and the egoic interpretation that it has on every event that's occurring around us and what we say about it. Then there's the emotion. You know, we have an emotional reaction to what occurs. Both those are, as Buddha expressed, both of those are fleeting.
Yes.
You know, they come, they go, they disappear. And they are not truth. They are merely there for a moment as an expression of the conditioning that we've been through, or another way that he expressed it was karma. So conditioning is karma. If we don't remove the conditioning, we are subject to karma. And that imposes on us a result and a way of living and being that we actually don't want. So, and then the third way is, behind that is the perception, the soul, the spirit, the consciousness, however we wish to express it. That is the I am, the knowing, the being. And that watches. So you have this three levels, and hence the Holy Trinity.
Yes.
Yes? The Holy Trinity.
Absolutely.
These three perceptions going on at once. And to come to awakening or come to awareness, we can know this intellectually, we can talk about it, we can see it, we can be aware of it. But until we've had an actual experience of it.
Empirical experience, exactly.
Yes.
It can't be somebody's, you can read all the knowledge you want and wisdom and sacred texts, but until you walk it, it's not your path or wisdom, and you're following some of that. That's why I know Christ and Buddha and Lao Tzu, they're all hanging out there going, oh my God, don't they get that, you know, we said to follow our path, not do it exactly like we did. Everybody has their own. How did they get lost? But it's all working out perfectly.
So true, Lisa. It is working out perfectly. You know, I love the expression out of the Course in Miracles that the curriculum is set. The time in which you take to learn it is entirely up to us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Beautiful
I think that's part of the big problem, isn't it? A lot of people think it needs to be done at a certain time scale, or are they there yet, or have I missed something, and it's really just whether you get it or not. Some people may never get it. Problem. It's just something they have to realize that they're not there, or they're not going to ever overcome it. I guess.
And I think many on this path have certainly heard the teaching that, you know, the more that you try and grasp it, the more that it will move away from you, and it's not possible to grasp it.
Yeah, that's when spiritual ego comes in. You think the ego is something to battle. Wait till you get to spiritual ego.
Yeah.
Now, there's the three-headed monster.
And Lisa, as you said, you know, it's so true that Buddha, you know, on his deathbed said to Ananda, his personal servant, who had spent the most time with him, you know, during his lifetime, he said, Ananda, you know, don't follow me, find your own way. So even though he'd spent, you know, most of his life, nearly 50 years of teaching, his final words before passing were, don't follow me.
Exactly.
And of course, you know, what does, you know, a human do? What does the ego come in and do? It makes a system out of it. And it seems somewhat ironic, I guess, that you must teach and try and create a system of learning and understanding, because we live in a structure. We live in a structure of understanding. Yeah. So you must use words. You must use a structure to teach. But ultimately, to get there, as you rightly said, Lisa, you initially use that structure to climb the ladder, but eventually you must kick the ladder away
Exactly, and then it doesn't apply anymore.
It doesn't
But
apply
it's,
anymore.
I think, to address more what Brett had just stated, like, and my business is called Transcendence, but it's DANCE, and I mean like the dance of transcendence. You know how you talked about there, you go up and then you crash, and the masculine and the feminine, and it's this dance, but it's what your soul chose, Brett, before incarnating, wanted to experience. And there is no wrong or right timing. It's all divine, and you can't miss it if you want to, first of all. You know, second of all, it's beautiful, because if we all woke up at the same time, we'd explode the world like we did a few times, and or we wouldn't use our power appropriately like we did in Atlantis and that kind of a thing. And this time it's so that, you know, like popcorn, you hear one pop and then you hear another pop, and that would be like Christ and then Buddha and Lao Tzu. And now we're to the point where it's going pop, 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 and everybody's popping. But it's perfect. But we're not going to blow up we're not going to burn all the kernels in the bottom, and we're not going to blow the top off the popper either. I think that's why it turned out this way. But it's everybody's choreography. But there are, just like in order to teach dance, you teach certain routines, that's your stuff. But then what you do is you give the skills or the archetypal tools or the colors on your paint easel to pick from, and then once they've got the basics, let them go. And that's what we all do, don't you think? I think that's
look, I think we're guided. You know, when I started doing the events, we would use music a lot in the events, and we used to, I guess, tune into when we were working with somebody, and we would have a number of songs that we would play whilst we were working with them. And later, we would put someone behind, you know, as a DJ, and they would actually try and tune in and pick the songs. And we got to see there were just amazing coincidences with that, and other people who were there in the events and what they would say. And we started to see the synchronicity coming in all the time. And, you know, as you start to perceive that in life and you see it occurring in your own life, it obviously starts to go, well, it can't just be in the event, it's across all of life, and it happens. So I believe that the divine as an equal force of expression within this universe, you know, we have the ego, or Mara, whichever you wish to call it, and we have the divine. And equally, when you look in nature, you can clearly see those two forces at work. You know, one creates our cells, one destroys our cells. We have Shiva and all those expressions of that. And from what I've seen, from what I've read and what I've experienced personally, is the divine is always guiding us. It is always putting those synchronicities in front of us. When we reach a point of enough awakening, we start to look for those synchronicities.
Yeah, those are the breadcrumb trail to follow. Follow that string of pearls. Even if the thing that got me, though, is, you know, during my samadhi states and then my kundalinis, and I've had quite a few rounds, and I was always crashing because awful things were happening, like being beaten or hospitalized or my child taken away or whatever. Isn't it interesting, even in your first story, you talked about how it's often common to have extreme trauma and challenge, and everything's being ripped away from you and you think you're dying, when really what you're doing is being transformed to a higher level. So you and your first wife are done, and it's time to go to the next level. And then you get this chapter, and it's actually the universe choose to let go of it because it's trying to bring you something even better. And it's really hard to get that shift, you know, and then find the gift in it. It worked the first few rounds, you know. I kept going out trying to go against the tsunami instead of learning how to surf it. I'm not, no. Still it's hard.
And that's what I'm so passionate about, is getting people to realize the conditioning, how we can step away from the conditioning, because invariably pain is part of life. You know, part of this universe. That is something in this universe that we are not capable of being able to escape. But suffering is something different. Suffering becomes a choice when we have enough awareness to move away from that conditioning, to see your participation in that conditioning and stop it from getting to suffering. Pain, yes, but let's prevent it from going into suffering.
Yes.
You know,
we
even
have that choice.
If we could use Buddha as the example, we could talk about Jesus or Lao Tzu or anyone. You know, in their own lives, they had many, many challenges. I mean, Buddha's own brother tried to kill him.
Yeah.
Tried to run him over with an elephant, for goodness sake. I'm sure he could have been more creative, really. You know, he had to leave the community of at that stage, I think 750 odd monks that had gathered together, and Buddha walked out for over a year because of the internal bickering and fighting that went on. So he had many, many challenges. You know, being enlightened doesn't stop at the challenges.
No, it starts them.
You know, I think that's the misperception. It's not the events, it's how we react to the events. What wise, wisdom-based choice coming out of that inner perception rather than the mental or the emotional perception of how I'm going to react to this event.
Yes.
That's what mastery is. That's what enlightenment is. That's when we truly reach a place of inner peace. And it's not the event. We might momentarily react to it, but our action against that event, you're still going to feel those emotions come up. You know, something traumatic happens. If you lose a loved one, you are going to feel distraught. There is no doubt about that, no matter how enlightened you are, because that is the nature of humanity. That is the nature of the duality. That will be there. But how quickly you move from that, you know, I've seen, you know, just thinking as I'm speaking of this beautiful client, an amazing woman who's unfortunately her son, you know, got a very serious form of cancer when he was about 6 years of age, and eventually died of it by 11. And you can imagine, right, the trauma and the distress and the pain of going through that, watching your son slowly die, going through 6 years of chemotherapy, having to travel, you know, 400 kilometers every weekend to have chemotherapy. Just amazing. And her final acceptance and peace of that, you know, was amazing to watch. It was truly, you know, an example of being in the divine, being in that place of acceptance, of final acceptance of what has occurred. Did that mean that she still didn't experience pain? No, of course she did. But was she accepting of it? Yes. And that's the key to, I think, you know, truly being enlightened, to realize that when the event happens, you're going to experience those emotions. Your body will react to those emotions. That's not going to sit. But being able to be accepting of it.
No, I honor that completely. I call it breaking your heart wide open. Yes. And I call it spiritual morphine. Yes. Because when you get there, and even that can be elusive at times. Like, you don't know my story, and it's way too long, but I will suffice to say, you know, the same archetypal pattern. And when you lose everything and then you get into non-attachment, but you can't, it's really hard to get non-attached to being a mother. So one thing as a woman is specifically, not that it's not as a man either, but there is a physical connection that, because it came from our body, that's a little more intense in a emotional way. And we're much more emotionally, you know, vocal is probably the best way to say it. It's not that it's stronger or better or any of that. I would never use those.
Not at all. Not at all.
I would use those terms. But it's about being able to encompass, or like a white blood cell that does phagocytosis, be able to not only swallow it, but digest it, and then dance afterwards. You get it, and that it doesn't always. Some things go in our mouth we want to spit out before we can't even swallow them. You know, some of them we can swallow, and then we're like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up. And then some of them we go down and they go through, but then it's like, oh, I got to run to the toilet. you know, there are levels and levels, and I thought I was to the point where I could suffer anything and forgive anyone prior to my Kundalini. And boy, did I! Oh, was I so naive? I had filled with spiritual ego, had no idea. Thought I broke through to freedom. Oh yeah, well that's what lures you in, just like in Nemo, that fish with the white light. That, oh, you're so pretty, and then, oh. But when you survive it and you break through, that's once you get through, even though it can come back, you don't have the option to out or to quit. It's just not there anymore once you break through that barrier. Like you said, when you guys went out in nature, and once you plug in like that, you either have to learn to integrate this 3D reality that you were talking about, the banality of it, the boringness, the averageness of it, or you just leave, and it's about being able to have that experience. You notice how Buddha and Christ and everybody, they had that experience and then left their body. I don't think that's where we're headed here. It's about having that experience and integrating it into our physical reality and our mind. It is literally, Kundalini's the merging, your right and left brain are working together and activated. And it's a beautiful thing when it happens, but it's so frustrating when you get there, because the vast majority of other children on the playground aren't there. And it can be very isolating if you didn't have yourself. And then start to attract others that are conscious and loving. Like we all are here on this show. Brett's my best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the one good thing I think most people do once they have an awakening and an understanding, is you go and look for the good people, because that is the part of the savior. You're actually out there going, right, I need to find other good, open people, die in this, vast emptiness of everyone else is thinking about. Because you know that you're in the wrong spot, and if you don't get out, then that goes as well.
Exactly. Well, let's go directly to your workshops, Brett, because obviously we're all preaching to the choir amongst ourselves. It's lovely to hear your perspective and your story and be sharing this panel with two amazing divine masculine men. But why don't you talk about your programs and how you actually are you and your wife are actually doing your workshops and your programs, and what you do to help people experience this shift and recognize to step back and have this higher perspective, so that they can free themselves to actually stop being the one holding themselves back and access their life force and their spirit and what they came to share with the world.
Well, I think it's important that everyone realizes you can read as many books as you like, you can gain as much wisdom and knowledge as you like, but ultimately, to truly get to where we're all seeking to get to, it has to be an experience, because the conditioning was created in an experience in the first place. And what unwinds that is another experience, a true knowing oneself of that experience. Yep. And what we've done within Ignite Awakening, which is the main event that we hold, is we've created the environment in which those experiences come along, and they really, as you, I think, expressed before, start popping off like popcorn, and you get this insight into one's own nature. And that becomes the highest form of learning, because once we've had that, we know it directly ourselves. And there is no higher form of learning than that. If we've experienced it, we know it to be true ourselves. And it's about ourselves. As we see it within ourselves, we go, okay, I get it. I see how that was formed. What I told myself about my father, that he didn't love me, is not true. He actually did love me. And the only reason he couldn't open up was that he was actually closed off himself. But as a 6-year-old girl, I interpreted that he was withdrawing or holding something back from me. That was a lie. And that doesn't just become something that I've understood mentally. It becomes an emotional shift inside oneself that then, as you said, breaks open the heart. And the heart knows the truth. It experiences the truth of that at that deep, deep level. And that becomes a collapsing of the pattern. And then what occurs is, instead of attracting men that would withdraw from you, you start attracting the very opposite of that. You attract men who, in fact, would open up, embrace the feminine, fully express the masculinity without withdrawal, without going into their own feminine and, complaining and whinging about her and the things that men do when they're in the feminine.
Yeah, well, they've had a lot of women around that try to take their balls and put them in vice grips for a long time. So I don't blame men for that as well. There's been a really unhealthy imbalance of power amongst the use of power in our relationships, for at least I know in my country. Australia. I was only there for a little bit. I actually really like you Aussies. You have a lot of sauciness, and you're really creative and fun and intelligent.
But yeah, it's the same here, Lisa. Exactly the same here. There's no difference. You know, I've been, as you said, I've been to Los Angeles and spoke there. I'm going back in February again to do more events. You know, I've been to London this year. I'm going back again next year. And it doesn't matter, you know, where we come from, even if it's India or wherever. There is definitely that imbalance that's become quite firmly entrenched as a cultural thing across the globe now. And, you know, we see many women, you know, being conditioned to use their masculine to become successful, whereas it's so much more beautiful to watch when they use their feminine to become successful. Because the feminine still has as much drive, as much strength, as much wisdom. In fact, more inclusive and wholesome wisdom than when a woman is in her masculine trying to drive something to occur.
And, absolutely. Absolutely. That was my mother. She had no divine feminine. And my poor father was all divine feminine, but so shut down. And it's funny you just used that example of the story, because that's exactly what happened. Only by the time I was like 20, I knew my father loved me, but I asked, why won't you show me? Why can't you hug me? Why? And I know why. He had a drinking problem, whatever, and done a lot of things he couldn't own and couldn't look at, was in denial of. But I tried to reach him and say, let's just look at each other and forgive and hug each other and let it go. I mean, I wrote poems his whole life, and he ended up I told you about my son being taken. That had to do with my family, and my mother was that controlling. She was waking up to what was going on in the world, and instead of attacking what was attacking her and pulling out her foundation of everything she built her life on, she projected it onto me and saw me as the evil one, and that I was destroying my son and raising him to have his own mind and not watch television and spend lots of time in nature and have long hair. Oh my God, that's not what boys do. But whatever, my dad just passed away on my birthday a couple weeks ago, and they wouldn't say goodbye. But I had already done so much work and a lot of my own stuff, and I went into the astral and I did what I wanted. I had that experience, and I did it before he passed, and I was peace, and I actually was really good. And I felt him when he passed. He came to me. He was like a dog with its tail between its legs after it just peed on the rug, or it ate your brand new shoes that you paid $400 for because it couldn't help itself. And I didn't get to it till I was like, it was prior to my Kundalini awakening, but I kept trying to just touch hearts, and I'm like, just let the junk go. It's okay. We can talk about what happened. What's important is that we connect before we die. And he never got to do it. And I realized it's because he never loved himself, and he never had self-worth. So he was so locked in his own pain and guilt and shame that he couldn't take down that wall. He thought he was protecting himself, and missed out on experiencing the connection we could have had. And I'm so glad he's passed on and at peace now and doesn't have to do it anymore. But this is exactly what we need to do all over the world. And I'm so glad you're doing workshops. And so tell us about the ones you have coming up, and the different people can engage with you and do what you're doing to help us heal this world and bring the divine masculine and feminine together to use their power appropriately to co-complement, and I mean like angles, complementary angles that supplement each other and co-create and, you know, literally communicate.
Well, you do have another event on tomorrow, don't you? Tomorrow night is another event live on Facebook. I'm getting at.
Tomorrow night, I actually did one on Facebook tonight, Brett. So that one's just been completed this afternoon. We've got another event tomorrow night, which is a live event here in Perth, which is really a book signing and teaching event. So that's on for 2 hours tomorrow night. And then mid-October, on the 13th of October, we've got the Ignite Awakening event. So that's our final event for this year.
I do have the link to sign up and join you in Perth tomorrow at the bottom of the information of the video. And I have the link to your Facebook page where they can sign up for your event in October, as well as your website where they can go find your book.
Thank you.
Speak about the book at all, or?
Look, I think we've covered what the book actually covers in detail. You know, many people now have read the book, and most say that for them it was actually an awakening experience reading the book. So it was written from a place of clarity and great wisdom that literally, you know, flowed through. And the book itself is a great read. Like, it really does help people have that experience of who they truly are on the inside, and helps to separate themselves from the ego. So the event's on the 13th of October. We deal with all the things we've been talking about here, and certainly day 2 is mostly around relationships and getting that divine feminine masculine working. So couples definitely love it, and it's a very powerful event. And we actually are running a gift at the moment where we're giving away a free entry to the Ignite Awakening event. So if anyone is watching and they would like to
that
enter,
link is down below too. Be able to join it and enter your contest. You have it as a competition, correct? I read through the whole thing, and I love the question you asked. Why don't you tell them about it?
So we want people to be able to express fully, you know, why they want to come to Ignite, why they want to awaken, what is it that's calling them to be able to and want to awaken. And, you know, we want them to be able to share that. And then, you know, from the person that we can see that really wants it the most, we're very excited to be able to award that to them.
I'm sure. And I love the whole framework of the service, because I'm really about giving away a gift in order to inspire. Because even though many people may be there, that person who's really ready, who just doesn't have the money or could use it for something else, that's beautiful, because it is about service. At the same time, we still have to function in the world and earn our living and be able to do our job, but you can't serve from an empty well. So, but it's very important to give away as well. But I if I had time, I would read your book, but I can't. But I know what it's about already, because, you know, when we come from that place, it's just source with the faucet turned on, and it's like I don't even claim to do the writing. I just feel grateful that I did the work to get out of the way to have it come through me. So I will definitely go take a peek at it and look forward. And I'll put you on my suggested reading list on my website as well, because I'm all about paying attention to all the amazing individuals like you and your wife that are helping awaken the planet. Because like I said, we're the spiritual triage team. And there's a handful of us on the planet and too many oncologists. And we need it the other way around. So there's never enough to bring attention to the people.
When's the closing date for the competition?
Competition, we've actually just extended it slightly, Brett. So what we've decided to do is we're actually going to give away 2 gifts of an entry to Ignite. So we're going to announce the first one next week, and then about a week later, we'll announce the second one, and then the competition will be over. The gifts will be over with.
Wonderful.
Nice. That's a great idea. I love that, because actually it's given people more of a chance to get in, because this kind of competition is very popular, and it gives, you know, you an insight and them as an expression to let people know what they want, as well as they get to know what they want if you're writing it down. It's a bit of an example, you know, we call it like an exercise as well.
Exactly.
It's very creative too.
And it helps clarify for them, you know, where they're at and where they're heading to and what they actually want. So it's a great way of doing it. So thank you both so much for having me on the show. It's been lovely. I've been really enjoyed being here. My
pleasure.
To both of you.
Immense gratitude. Thank you for joining
you are
us.
A legend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And hopefully I might even come in tomorrow night if I can. And because if you're going to be in Perth, I'm very close, so I might even come in and say hello and
excellent. Well, I'd love to have you there. So please, if you can attend,
absolutely.
I think that's absolute perfect synchronicity. I love that, Brett. The Bretts have to unite, get that divine masculine.
We're definitely so close.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there are no acts. There are
Lovely.
no acts. I love it. I love it. We do have a practice, Brett, on our show at the end, where we each go around and say something we're grateful for right before we cut out. So I'll go ahead and do that. I did want to say just one little detail. Through all of this, I didn't want to take away by getting into my story too much, but I love how you study the various theologies, and I did a lot of that too. And I even have a Buddhist name called Dechen Palmo, and my son is Yeshe Tarshen. So I'm sure you'll understand what that means. I just wanted to throw it out. Even though I don't really practice religion anymore, I love the wisdom and the value that it has to bring people to their spiritual awakening. So with that, everyone knows how to get a hold of you. So grateful. I'm hoping to have you'll have a really big turnout. The more people that show up for this, the better and faster we heal this world and start having some fun. Get through the shit to start the dancing. So what are you grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today?
Yeah.
I'm grateful today for just being in this beautiful environment that I live in, that, you know, I've been so blessed to have found this, to be able to share it with my family, and to be in such a great, peaceful environment. So that's what I'm grateful for today.
Heaven, yeah.
Wonderful.
Especially since, what was Mother Teresa's quote? I always loved that. I used to swear that under my breath. You know, peace does not mean to be in a place where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be amongst all of them and still be calm in your heart. I smashed that coffee cup against the wall at one point. Thank you so much. And BrettStar, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for today. Actually, I think patience is a good thing to be grateful for. I'm trying to get a new job up north of WA, driving trucks, so I can go back to Bali and live. But at the moment, I'm just waiting for the go-ahead to fly up there. So I'm grateful that I'm patient.
Well, that's a really good magic spell right there, because you know, I always say patience. I go time, my only most unfavorite 4-letter word.
What are you grateful for today, Lisa?
I'm sorry?
What are you grateful for today? What's your gratefulness?
I'm grateful that I have finally surpassed. I used to put this on everything, but I was just rereading it yesterday. I'm so grateful I survived my path in all the turmoils to be literally living the life that I saw that I was supposed to live, but didn't know the beginning of how to manifest it. And all of it is just showing up so much I have to pinch myself. So I'm grateful that I didn't give up on myself. And I'm grateful that I survived everything. And I'm yet again seeing that, you know, it's not the sun setting, it's the sun rising. I finally turned that corner again in my own life. So I'm grateful, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you. And this is just a wonderful synchronicity that shows we're all on the right path. You know, both Bretts, those synchronicities mean we're on point. So I love you all. Thanks for joining us on Consciousness Caffeine. Have an excellent, most Rocksome event, both you Bretts, tomorrow night. And everyone down in Perth, go ahead and go join. I'm sure if I was not on the other side of the globe, I would be there myself. So everyone, peace, love, abundance, joy, and have an amazing, wonderful week. And we'll see you next week on Consciousness Caffeine. Shine on.
Thanks again, Brett. You're a legend, mate. Thanks for turning up.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, both of you.
Nom Yoho Renge. Oh no, it's Om Mani Padme Hum.
Namaste.
Shine on. We just
shine on.
Go ahead, Brett.